Anyone in the public who's none? Then I'm open for a motion. What committee members would like to discuss first? Okay, you have a motion on the floor, Colton?
I will second.
Second. Okay, let's I guess we just do this by acclamation. We don't have anybody on board, right? So all those in favor, the motion to approve the consent calendar?
Aye.
Okay, aye. Opposed? No opposed. We'll move on to the next item. Regular agenda, which should be relatively quick. The chair has no report other than Donna will be returning.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they're
We could
Clean
sweep
sweep.
the entire committee out and we would run.
I'm on one other board where that's a company. One person is removed.
Both are mine.
We have numbers today.
Okay, find item number 4, which is staff report. Nick.
Okay, it's the Nick show today, so, sure.
My calendar, great.
So staff report, 3 items. We are still basking in the glory of our prepay, so I didn't put it up here. I put it, it's not on the page, but just quickly, we did see 3 CCAs do prepays after we went. I think I had alluded that there was sort of a backlog behind us. And so CPA did I think it was their 3rd prepay. San Diego did their 1st and San Jose did their 1st. They all went successfully. There's one more to go that's in the queue, and that's Sonoma, our friend Garth, CFO up there, and I'm told they'll come probably next week. So that is,
What were their numbers like?
they're all around the same ballpark, 12%-ish.
Okay.
I wish I could say we got the most, but they're all about the same. They all had to navigate somewhat choppy markets. Each had their own story from what I'm told, some war stories from the advisors, but they all got done at around that ballpark. So good news for the industry, savings for customers. We'll start at some point next year thinking about our next one. So more to come. I haven't gotten there yet, but no reason not to.
Yes, please.
Excuse me. Which meeting are we in? Nick, do you have a sense that anything may change when Trump takes office in terms of municipal bonds and market itself? Do you have any sense of impact there on prepays?
I don't. You know, there is a concern. If I knew this for sure, I'd be in a different business, I always say. There's a concern that with under Trump policies, inflation will take hold, which could drive interest rates higher, which is generally pretty good for prepays. But I wouldn't guarantee it. But I don't see anything. I'm not an expert in the muni bond market, but I don't see anything on the horizon.
Thank you.
The 3 items on here, the first one just quickly I forget if there's overlap on the executive committee, I think Donna, but we will be presenting in an hour and a half a energy risk management policy. Risk management used to be a part of Roy's function. With the hiring of Kelly, who is here, we'll be presenting the item later today. We hired our own risk manager who reports to me, and we are rolling out a formal energy risk management policy. So if you're interested and not on the committee, stay around and listen to that. But I think that'll be a big improvement on what we have today, a lot more structure and governance. Second item on here is just an FYI. We did receive a report, a filing from PG&E, which is indicating what their rates will be on January 1. They're not guaranteed, and this is preliminary, but it's an ERA filing they made a couple weeks ago. And the 2 numbers on here are the PCIA and PG&E's generation rates, which have an impact on how our rates compare to PG&E bundled rates. I put on here 3 columns, what the current is today, what we had budgeted for, which doesn't really matter that much other than what we had, what's in our numbers, and then what we just saw in this filing. On the PCIA, it was around a little north of 1 cent, or it is a little north of 1 cent. We had thought, the rumors we had heard was the PCIA was gonna balloon almost double to 2 cents, and that's what's in our budget. And that's what's driving a lot of the use of the rate stabilization fund over the next 18 months. With the ERA update, we're actually seeing the PCIA go down, which, as you all know, down is good. And so that was really welcome news. It's not guaranteed yet, so again, I don't want to jump through the hoops yet. But if that does happen, that's going to be a lot of wind at our backs as far as our comparability to PG&E's rates. And then the bundle generation rates at about 15 cents currently. We had heard that the numbers were gonna go down from all the experts, not a lot, but to 14.2, and you can see with the recent filing, it looks like it's gonna be about the same. So when you put those two together, it's almost 2 cents favorable relative to what we had budgeted. And so that is gonna be a big positive impact on our next year's fiscal year results, if we want to offer a 5% discount, which is what we've sort of been in the past triangulating around. If we are to do nothing, which, just as a background, we were not planning to update our rates on January 1. We've recently got into the cycle of doing it along with our fiscal year, so we recently updated our rates on July 1, or actually August 1, they went into effect. And ideally, unless extraordinary circumstances, we weren't planning to update those up or down. We are gonna be reassessing that over the next few weeks. These numbers just came in. We're gonna do a budget refresh. If we were to do nothing and leave our rates where they are, our customers would enjoy about a 9% discount to PG&E. We're currently 5%, so they would get a little bit of a pickup over the next 6 months until we then would update our rates. We'll decide if we want to maybe increase our rates to get it back down to 5%, or maybe just do nothing. I don't know the answer yet. We're meeting with Sean over the next month, and we'll come back to this committee with the analysis for the results. So that was somewhat, or very good news that we got. The final thing, again, just FYI, and I know Donna, you especially are aware of this, we are planning to launch an RFP for 2 services. The first one is our accounting outsource support, Maher Agent Accountancy, which you guys are all aware of. We've used Maher since founding, since the beginning. Best practice is to look and see what's out there, to pressure test our pricing. So we are planning to launch an RFP next year. I will say, I've talked to a lot of my peers, and it seems that Maher is the only game in town.
Yeah, to some degree, I think you're right.
So CPA is the only one I've learned who actually doesn't use Maher, and they do it themselves. So that's something we may consider, bringing it in-house as we've grown. So we'll look at that. We'll come back to you with the results, but if I was a betting person, there's probably not a lot out there.
Matt,
Yes, please.
so I think what that tells me then is we always wanna, try to figure out, maybe we want a backup plan if something were to happen to Maher, like if somehow. It seems like a bigger organization. When we first hired them, they seemed kind of small. They now seem to have built out their organization, so it's not like singular person
definitely
dependent at all. But you never know, right? You just always wanna, it would be good to understand, like, there is no one else out there in the market.
Well, I think
that
there
is-
are other outsourced accounting support we could definitely use. I think Maher is the only one who focuses on CCA
Okay.
world, so that is benefit.
Yeah.
You could go somewhere else, there'd be a learning curve, anyone have to
we
learn
wanted to.
about the industry, but it's not rocket science. I'm sure they could figure it out.
It's just interesting that no other accounting firm in 7 or 8 years has developed this level of expertise.
He's got
They
an
took
itch.
the ball there. Similar, there are a couple of institutions that are similar, where they just really invested in our business model and grew along with us.
So we'll come back, we'll do that. The other RFP we are planning to launch is for our banking service provider. Backstory here, as you all know, is we have been with First Republic, I think, for a while. When First Republic basically went bankrupt, or before they went bankrupt, JP Morgan swooped in, acquired First Republic. That closed last, I think it was April or May, so we've transitioned to now a JP Morgan client. We didn't choose them, but that's the way it played out. It would have probably been good practice anyway to do an RFP, but given the JP Morgan acquisition, we want to test what's out there. There's also been some concerns about JP Morgan's financing of fossil fuel
Oh, well, in
industry.
the context of it all right now, I'm not sure that's such a big deal. given that the Trump administration is gonna make huge changes around all that.
Yeah,
So I guess,
and also if we want a big bank, most are gonna have the same issue. We could decide not big bank, but so we'll have to weigh that. So more to come and we're gonna do that in first quarter.
Will that be something in our RFP that asks
Definitely.
about that question? Because I know that we had gotten public comments on that, so it
Yes.
would be good that we have that data. If it's everybody, then.
yeah, exactly.
There is a banking RFP for CCAs that probably has been updated many times since I was doing it. That includes that, so that would be something good to
Yeah,
check in with Mike about.
I'm definitely all for leveraging.
Leveraging.
But sustainability will definitely be a category. You know, how, as well as their diversity, all those kind of questions.
Well, how will we figure out who's supposed because there's so many small regional little banks, you know, that might be interested in this business, that might fit our,
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, I haven't gotten there, I guess, just thinking off the cuff, first thing I'd probably do is reach out to my peers and say, what do you use? That's a starting point, maybe not the end point, but if there's other banks and do you like them? And positive references, but I'm open to, I'm not gonna do an RFP for 30 banks, I mean, there's a lot of banks out there, so there's probably a limit. But I'm open to yours if you guys have suggestions.
Facilities that are required. So I think we would get a hold of that RFP, tailor it to our needs. Make sure that our distribution list includes local banks, regional banks, and that meet the minimum threshold and then go.
So, one way you could do it is you could do like a we're taking requests for proposal, here's minimum qualifications and standards, submit your qualifications and standards. So you just are open.
To the world,
to
everyone.
And then from there, narrow it down to like, we think these are the 10 most qualified, and then get your superior RFP at that point. It's how we, request for qualifications, and that's how we used to do it a lot for like big pensions, because like. You don't want to exclude everyone, you want to be very inclusive, but you don't, as you say, want to have to sort through 30 or 40 RFPs.
Right.
But in our queue, like these are the minimum standards of qualification, assets under management, local office in San Mateo County, blah, 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 Experience working with CCAs would be helpful, maybe not necessary. And then you can get a little bit of framework from that. You don't have to do it, it might add an extra step, but it's just another option.
It would help us cultivate and see who else is out there, and then I think you shortlist it.
Yeah, and then you could shortlist and not have to worry about it.
Okay, so more to come there, and if you have any suggestions, reach out. The other thing, it's not on here, but I see Mark here, so I'll just mention it, and I don't know if I'll mention this every meeting, but we did officially start our process for finding a new home. Thank you, Donna, we reached out to 3 brokers, and asked for their qualifications. One, we did reach out to JLL, so thank you for that contact. And then the other 2 are CBRE and Cushman Wakefield, so kind of like the big ones. We also had an initial conversation with Sam Trans. They are in the process of building a building in, what town is it? Millbrae. And have potentially half a floor, more space than we need, but several.
I think the building's built.
The
right?
building's, but
They're doing the TI.
They're doing the tenant.
they
Yeah.
did a tour at the last Council of
Yeah, yeah.
Cities, and it's right there with the public transportation.
Yeah,
which is
so there's a
nice.
lot of benefits. We had a call with this guy, I forget his name. He sort of laid out their situation, what could be available, their timing, which could work with ours. We're gonna potentially do a hard hat tour, although it says we may need a hard hat, but I may wear just because we have hard hats now. We do. But go check it out. There's a lot of benefits. I understand near
Yeah.
public transportation. But I also don't know what else is out there. So we want to sort of
Definitely.
see what's out there. It seems like one firm already submitted a sort of a package and I just eyeballed it and it looked like a lot of nice looking offices that are available, so, so we'll see. So, more to come, but that just sort of kicked off.
So you're just looking still at the 3 different agencies to see, brokers to see.
We were gonna do a informal RFP
And
and
a
bring them in,
meeting.
yeah, bring them
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
bake off, tell us why you, and then pick one and then move forward with that one.
I think that's really important. We just interviewed 2 of those firms and and Cushman Wakefield, those 3 firms, that's exactly who we interviewed for the city of Burlingame is figuring out our city hall right now. And they're all really good and they all have slightly different styles.
Okay, well, I'm interested in the process. Yeah, I think the CBRE is focused on government entities, which seems benefit, and we'll have to figure out how to navigate the SAM strand, you know, like bring that in and. Cause we would, I don't know if we need a broker there and figure it out.
I think you, a broker.
Help negotiate and stuff, yeah,
And there's all kinds of little things that they're gonna have expertise in negotiating.
yeah.
I'm sure your legal counsel would not want to.
Yeah, that's true. I just hate paying full freight when we basically brought the idea to them, so.
I don't.
Oh,
Yeah, over the period, so if it's a 5-year.
So
they will
you're-
actually pay that.
okay. This is all new to me.
Yeah. That's what I did, put myself in college doing this, so, basically what's gonna happen is you pick who you want. They're going to, there's gonna be a you're gonna want them to negotiate tenant improvement allowances, you're gonna help them negotiate. They're gonna know the market conditions for so many terms of the lease. And then the person technically who would pay the commission is the building owner. So,
Yeah.
and they would just represent you. And
Secretary of
that's,
State.
right, and that's where you're gonna have, and I mean, CBRE is great too. That's who we ended up picking, but they did do that deal, so they might be on
Both sides.
of it, so you just should explore.
Okay.
that, Understand how. Mission, and if you want any help, let me know.
Okay,
I should.
Could I add on to that?
please, of course.
and
We got
this-
not a lot to talk about today, so.
Steps of this, and Nellie will be coming back on
Yes.
December 2nd and kind of joining that team to help out. Ultimately, what we plan to do, we've queried the staff extensively. The issue of public transit has come up as a very high desire. We also plan to survey the board to find out sort of what is your appetite, and there are people who come from the southern part of the county and further coastside, et cetera. So looking at that, ultimately, I think we will look at this property to see, okay, this is a benchmark, we could stay here. It's not ideal, but we could. So what does that look like? What are our options in the leasing domain? And then whether or not it makes sense to potentially buy a building. There are a number of CCAs that have used some of their investment savings to buy a building. I don't know that that would be the right fit for PCE, but I think since we're at this, we might as well
Yep.
look
Be
at
considered.
if that makes any kind of sense. So just so you know.
May I please?
Sure, of course.
So a couple things. You should, I'll give you my contact in the city of Burlingame, we can give you we have a slightly different RFP, but it's the same, like we were looking for headquarters, right? Now, we can only look in Burlingame. Although my colleague, this best, said, the other person I was running against said, well, why don't you just move your offices down to San Carlos? There's a lot of space down there. And I'm like, I called Adam Rack and I'm like, hey, Adam. What days do you meet for council? We might need the others. It was kind of funny, but obviously cities are much more constrained because we have to operate in our own city. PCE is gonna be in really good shape to, negotiate and live. Just what we're finding right now, like to build our own space was something like 1,500 to 2,000 a square foot, depending on if we replace parking and all kinds of stuff, and that didn't include land acquisition. So super expensive to build right now, but purchasing is probably half to a third of that. But then you don't have PCE doesn't have the ability to, you know, move within a city. Cities don't, it's a different deal, right? You kind of have, you're stuck in that city.
Yeah.
Don't like, you're not gonna have an office in Burlingame. So, those would be some of the things to kind of work on. I am super happy to help pop in, sit in the interviews, do anything that we need. Just having, that was what I said, that's what I did, was I was institutional real estate investment consultant, pension funds, and we looked all the time, like we buy to hold and stuff like that. So I'm happy to help. Carlos, you have a big strong background in real estate too. Yeah, so use the research.
I work with all of those companies doing facilities for
Yeah, so you can,
Cisco and.
you've got some really good resources here, so
Great.
please use us where
Okay,
when
thanks
you
for that.
can or they need or.
I think Mark had something, but I'm the only one who can see
Hi,
it.
Mark.
A little bit and remind. Pieces. This. You know, that's the right way to be happening, right?
And that time will go by,
Yep,
so,
okay.
thank you.
No, I just, one thing I'm gonna say, this is a letter. I honestly, I haven't seen all the birds on the great deal. I don't think it was a great steal.
Okay,
Good.
They bought the building.
What?
They bought the building,
No.
right?
No, not yet. It's a
It's a lease.
It's a lease deal, yeah, and the conditions under which that they have not been. Or sharing with me, doesn't sound like it's a great.
okay,
So, I mean, look.
Yeah, we're
this
just
is- this
listening.
is-
good.
Right, so if you're using CBRE, make them work for you, right?
And yeah, there's parking's not as plentiful there, we learned, so there's pros and cons, so we'll just weigh it all.
Well, I mean, one thing about the building or buying option, I mean, you could use it as a demonstration opportunity. You know, if you, I agree, building ground up is a pretty expensive thing, but if you could find an existing facility, buy it, convert it into a zero net carbon building, you could, you know, even if we only occupied a portion of it, you could use it as kind of an incubator, demonstrator kind of thing. It's just one wrinkle you might think about. Would be beyond what we need for our, you know, day-to-day
I think we have to run all of the scenarios.
Yeah.
That's, and so
Absolutely.
even if it comes out like, this is definitely
Yeah,
not, whatever, but
sure.
it's, now's the opportunity to run everything, see where we are in the market, see what makes sense for us. The configuration that we need is different than we have today. Because we're not all in office and we need
Right.
bigger gathering space as
Right.
opposed to a lot of cubes. So it just flips it a little bit in terms of. Yeah.
I would just add definitely the staff and what they want, you know, 1,000,000% the most important, and then I appreciate the board being asked, I think that's great, and if there's a way to like discount my vote, I mean, you know, half the time I get to go to Burlingame when I have meetings, you know, and so if, you know, I don't mind driving somewhere far. So if there's some of us, right, that you can, if there's a way to like put that in the Survey Monkey, look, I'll go anywhere, and a way to weight that, because our colleagues from the coast have to go so far, and they can't really hop on BART to get to Millbrae either, so I just want to like, if there's a way in the survey to let people discount their own votes, if that makes sense.
Man, another question would be, and this maybe be a legal question, is does the office space need to include meeting space, or can we work with another organization, either the city or, you know, people like Bosca needs, you know.
Osco wishes they had this. It's very difficult, because we meet in the rec, the rec is amazing, but it's set up and break down every time,
Yeah,
and we have a
100%.
lot of pressure to do virtual public comment, which we're not doing, and it's difficult.
there
They
could be-
they drool over when I tell them about this.
you could be meeting in depending on the chamber situation, I don't know what everybody's chambers look like, you know, if it's just 5 like ours, it doesn't really work, you have to get a big thing. But, you know.
Nellie looked at that
Yeah,
earlier
well-
this year,
And,
when we all came back, maybe it was 2023.
yeah,
And we didn't find anything that
That
was
worked.
set up for the public, for the size that we needed. And the recording and Granicus and all the layers of
Yes,
things that we needed
100%,
for public
yeah.
meetings. So,
it's really.
but I think we're open to that, and she is coming back in a couple weeks, and will be a key person, because she has to run the meetings, right? And
Yeah.
with you all figure out the IT, we have certain IT requirements.
Yeah, pros and cons, having a big space like this is expensive, that's used 3 times a
Yeah.
month or something. Flip side, there's benefits of controlling, and so we're gonna weigh all that, see what's out there. Samtrans, they have a boardroom that they could potentially rent us, so it's in the building at least, and could be some ownership, not ownership, but some sort of more control, but we'll weigh all that for sure.
One Shoreline's a smaller group, we don't have the same room, but given that there are these other entities that meet. That is the potential, if you build out a really nice meeting room, is to let CCAG and everybody kind of know, and then
Yeah.
you could rent their space to other agencies to make.
We also need a space for 60+ staff members to gather at least once a quarter or more, because what we're doing too much right now is paying rental fees to meet in other places. So if to the extent that we can get a space, shared or not, that can accommodate bigger groups, more so space, that's the vision.
And those flexible, you know, where you can make a space bigger or smaller with those flexible walls would be great.
This room is flexible, but I'm told it's a huge pain, so.
Yeah.
It never gets done, but let's see, yeah, so. Anyway, more to come.
Yeah.
A lot more.
And you got plenty of direction. It's not it. I know you guys will be great.
Thank you. Okay, on to the real meat of it, which is
How are we doing?
the first quarter results. Okay, first quarter results, which ended September, which I know sometimes seem, at least to me, a little dated, but that's the way it works. It takes about a month to produce the results, and this is the meeting. I will caveat, and I'll show you a few of the pages when we get there. As I've alluded to, I'm a year into the job, and as sort of said, I've been using the opportunity to rework this presentation, so I've added some different formats, so hopefully an improvement, although feedback's a gift. If you like the old way, let me know, but just trying to add a little more transparency, to be honest, which hopefully is a good thing. First thing is load. Load was lower by about 3% over the first quarter. As you may remember, load was lower by about 4% all of last year. So we took a real careful look at our load, you know, it's a guess, you know, how are people gonna use electricity? Weather is a huge driver. We do it on a sort of normal weather basis, but you're always gonna have warm or cold winters, summers, et cetera. We took a real hard look at our load forecasting, EV charging, rooftop solar generation, all that kind of stuff, and we thought had made a big improvement. And I was really curious how the first quarter was gonna come out. Unfortunately, first quarter, well, I don't know, I mean, it's good, I guess, less electricity is not a bad thing, but we were about 3% below in the first quarter. As you can see, the graph on the right, the blue is the budget, the hard green is the actual. In July, we're actually right on budget, so we were started out good, and then August and September were about 4+% lower in each of those months. Seems to be, like anything, a variety of reasons. The biggest one was, as you probably all remember, it was a pretty mild August and September, so that was the bulk of the variance, and then there's some other small variances that we're still looking into. Like anything, we'll evolve our forecasting and probably try and do a better job forecasting load, but again, a lot of it's driven by weather.
I would add as a factor, just in our personal household, it's the high prices makes you use less, kind of like water, you know?
Yeah.
So that could be a.
So
new
we did
trend.
not, you know, there were days where we should have turned on the AC and we're like, we're not paying for that.
Suck it up. Yeah, that could be too, yeah, for sure. Revenue, this is a new page, so a little more transparency and detail here. We've broken revenues down into the three categories. Revenues was, I would like to think, right on budget, that's less than a 1% variance. $1 million below budget. Most of that was due to the load, which I just showed you, about 3%. There's some other small categories, non-electricity revenues, which is mostly programs revenues, things like Flex Market, GovBE, GovPB. Those are slightly lower than what we had budgeted, but all in, I'd like to say this is a pretty right on budget result for revenues. Cost of energy, again, this is a different format. When we shared the budget, we broke our cost of energy into these four categories. Energy, which is the actual electrons, capacity, this is the resource adequacy costs, our green attributes, and then other, which is a hodgepodge. So a little more transparency here. You can see in the first quarter, we were $10.5 million below budget. So that's good news. Like anything, there's ups and downs. So I'll just go through from the top to the bottom. On the actual energy, we were below budget by about $3.6 million. That was largely due to the load, so less electricity that we need to buy for our customers. We also saw CAISO resettlements, which is basically sort of true ups from past periods. And we did have some lower generation on the PPAs that we contract with, so offset that, but net 3.6 million favorable. Capacity costs were also favorable by 3.4 million. That was largely driven by just lower RA costs than we had budgeted, as well as some sale of excess RA. We had two battery projects that came on in the quarter, and it allowed us, I think one came on a little before than we were forecasting, so it allowed us to sell some of that excess RA to reap the benefits. The one category that's over is the green attributes, the REC and GHG free. That was entirely due to timing. We sell REC costs throughout the year, and the way we budget is we kind of even peanut butter spread or whatever cookie cutter, spread it across the year. We ended up realizing less sales in the first quarter than we had budgeted, but those sales will happen. It just will happen in the next quarter. So that's entirely due to timing. And in fact, talking to Roy's team, we expect to be under budget for the full year in REC GHG free. So that's a little bit of a misnomer, that $5.8 million. Contingency, that's something we budget in there just for good budgeting practice of about $9 million in the quarter. In the end, we basically didn't use the contingency. So the other energy capacity and GHG free kind of offset each other, and we were right on budget. In the end, we sort of didn't have to dip into our contingency, which allowed us to be $10.5 million favorable. Not to get too excited, it is $30 million above last year budgeted. So we expected that, but that's due to the higher capacity and REC cost that we've all know is happening. So what does that all mean for the sort of total income statement? Again, this is a new page with a little more detail, so I'll walk through it. Obviously, the same format, we've got first quarter actual, first quarter budget, and then last year's actual, and then the variance. Going from top to bottom, we already talked about the revenues being a little under budget, cost of energy being a little under budget. Net, that resulted in gross profit favorability of about $9 million, so that's good. As far as all of our operating costs, there are a lot of numbers on there. You can see almost all of them basically were favorable to budget. But the one number that sticks out is the programs of $4.2 million favorable. Some of that was due to timing, maybe a little aggressiveness on when our programs would launch. We had some delays in our turnkey building electrification program that just will get going. It just didn't get going yet. And then slightly slower uptake in our EV Ready program. Talking to Raphael, some of the variance is timing, but he does think over the full year we will be under budget by maybe up to $5 million. So not necessarily a good thing because we want to get the money out the door, but we're just seeing a little slower uptake on some of our programs. The other categories you can see kind of rounding error, some timing. The other big variance there is non-operating income of $7.4 million. That is basically interest income. That's two categories. One is unrealized gains, which is about $5.5 million. That was due to, I know it seems like a while ago, but interest rates coming down
Yeah.
over that 3-month period. As Don, all of you know, I liken that to like owning stock, like Google, the stock goes up and it looks good, but we haven't sold it yet, so it's not cash. We haven't, realized it, and actually in the first month of October, we saw the reversal, interest rates went up, long-term rates, so I don't know the number, but we probably gave back some of those unrealized gains in the first quarter, so I wouldn't focus too much on that, that's somewhat noise. We did have higher interest income. We had been somewhat conservative because you never know where interest rates are gonna be, and we had forecasted about 2.5%. And as you know, short-term rates are still north of 5%, so that's the favorability. So net, our change in net position is over $21 million versus budget. So a really strong first quarter. It's only one quarter, so I don't want to get too excited. We have 3 more to go. But it's a great way to start out the year. Some of the variance is timing, but some of the other variants I do think will stick throughout the year. We have just started a process to update our budget. Well, not update, the budget just never changes, but basically refresh our budget to look and see how are we looking for the full year based on what we know. And we're gonna present that to Sean in the next month or so, and we're gonna use that information to decide potentially what we wanna do with rates on January 1, as you saw with PG&E rates, and do we want to? Yeah, if we change rates, we'll definitely come to the board. My guess is we won't, but I don't wanna prejudge it. So a great quarter for change in net position, but again, only one quarter. As far as cash, not surprisingly, that's led to a better cash position than we were budgeting. You can see where our cash is held. We've got the First Republic. Now it's JP Morgan account. We're trying to target around 15 million in there just for working capital. It's sort of real cash. And then we've got our 3 asset managers, Camp, which is supposed to be more short-term in nature, PFM and Chandler. One thing I'm gonna have, I know it may seem like we haven't done it in a while, I'm gonna do it. We seeded these investment managers on January 1. I wanted to wait for a full year before coming back to this committee, and I assume you wanna know how they're doing versus benchmark. So it's not off my radar, I was just waiting, I wanted a full year of results. So come January or February, I'll present how we're doing, but punchline is they're doing well.
I know we have one, I'm pretty sure we wrote one, but I haven't seen in a long time, an investment policy statement.
Yes, we definitely have an investment policy statement. We updated it right when I joined. I think Andy took the lead and I think it just got implemented, so about a year ago. And we used that when we seeded Chandler and gave more money to PFM. Our total cash is almost about $400 million. We were budgeting around 365, so we did have some favorability in the first quarter. I know that seems like a lot. The forecast still has cash going down over the next 18 months, especially next fiscal year when we're gonna see a real uptick in cost of energy. So we're still targeting to be within the 180 to 250 days, within about a year and a half, but right now it does seem somewhat elevated. You can see the days cash has been coming down slightly from 415 to 372, but we are higher than what we would probably normally expect to be. And that is
Can I
it.
stop for 1 minute, please?
Sure.
So days cash on hand, 415 with 345, and now we're at 398 with 372 days cash on hand.
Yeah.
How did that recalculate?
It's based on costs, so
Of
we've seen
operations?
cost of operations. We've seen a big uptick as
So
you know.
we're increasing in size, cost of
Yeah, so you-
electricity, yeah.
Totally, mostly contract. Those two.
That's an interesting phenomenon. I don't know. Inverse.
Yeah. I mean, as we've gotten bigger, especially our supply portfolio, which is where the risk
Yeah.
is, it should make sense to have more cash, but.
Yeah. No, it's just interesting that,
Yeah.
It's not clean division.
well, the operating expenses and costs drive so much,
Yeah.
the requirement of cash on hand. You think it's static, I mean, intuitively, you kind of go, oh, it's probably static, right? But it's not, it's dynamic, so that's, creates a bigger complex.
Yeah.
Model.
So that's it.
Any other questions? Yes,
One tiny little thing about the facilities. We beat it to death, but not quite enough. The firms you mentioned are all big integrated real estate companies that do everything. There are some smaller brokerage companies who specialize in representing tenants and
Representing tenant.
tenants in commercial real estate deals. They claim to provide a better service because they don't do all of this other stuff. So you know, as you go forward, you might think about looking at a tenant rep broker if that's the situation we're in. I've been out of that loop long enough. I don't even know who's good in that space anymore, but there are brokers who specialize in representing tenants.
I got a question on cost of energy and recs.
Try to answer.
Yeah, so where is that market these days? When we were concerned about, or RA, not recs, I'm sorry, but the RA piece, I mean, in terms of being able to define what we needed to kind of meet our city obligations. It looks like it's,
Has leveled off.
yeah,
It
so
has leveled off.
it has leveled out.
Yes, and you remember last year we got hit with this extra 30 million.
Yeah.
In order to maintain compliance.
And it's one of the reasons we readjusted the budget, right, yeah.
And so we haven't, it's leveled off, and then we don't anticipate anything like that.
So we may have over budgeted, but then we also, we also have this rate stabilization reserve.
You can see up here for capacity last year, so first quarter of 24, we paid 33.5 million.
Right, yeah.
And this quarter we paid 63.7.
But also, Nick, for the 30 million, I know we talked about this a bunch when we adopted the budget. That 30 million also came out of surplus funds, right? To basically fund that compliance obligation. And then how is that booked in this year's budget?
For this year's budget, we just rolled it in.
It just rolled,
It
right?
just rolled into what we were forecasting. The budget had us losing about $10 million and using the rate stabilization to bring us back to a positive to be able to pay for the capacity based on the first quarter results. Now, maybe we don't need to dip into the rate stabilization fund this year. We'll see.
The other thing that we're really tracking, as Nick mentioned, is this variability around load. Because it's just been a bit of a moving target the last several years, and we're really trying to hone in on it, and so I know Ben's looking at a couple of different models that we're running, more than one model, just to kind of triangulate the information so we can get closer to actual.
I mean, and energy is typically considered an inelastic good, but needed, right?
Unless you tell me.
Unless you're
Right.
the right field house.
Actually changes, right, where so, yep, it may be an inelastic, but I'm gonna tighten that up. Right, so perhaps we hit some of that. And then, which means, you know, consumption patterns change.
But you're right, the cost to run your oven, your fryer, your microwave, things like that, charger and V. Those are great, like, you're not gonna say, well, I'm not gonna charge my V today because gas is, and our
Right.
prices are high. Because you're not. But yeah, or you might run your oven.
But Nick, when we've talked about this previously, I think we were sort of hovering around wanting to get to a place where we were within about 2%, I believe, in some of our earlier conversation. Just for budget accuracy,
Yeah, as far as budget versus actual,
that's right,
yeah, I mean,
because the variance number really makes a big difference.
yeah, I mean. Theoretically, if load shouldn't impact our financials because we don't make a ton of money on selling the electricity, so yes, revenue will go down, but so will costs. I'm sure Roy would like to be able to forecast better, but it shouldn't matter that much. Still want to do about as good a job of forecasting.
Well, it's just directly tied to rates.
So
Can I just ask, is there anyone in the public who wants to talk about it?
Great question.
Never. Okay, Donna, please.
Thank you for putting together the little sort of overview, you know, how changing political moves would affect us sort of financially. The immediate thing I see when I look at this is, you know, the massive cuts to climate, green, you know, green technology investments, climate, you know, cuts to environmental, climate, et cetera. I'm also wondering with tariffs, if tariffs are in fact, given how much of the material that our solar farms and different things are using are coming from China and abroad. Does it just make those deals unfeasible?
So far, according to Roy, no.
No,
It doesn't slow us down, but, you know, so we do not anticipate any pricing refresh of existing contracts. That's a
I
good
would say
news.
that's fine.
That's a good
I'm
news.
thinking more
It-
like future growth, right?
I think it may,
If you put a 2% tariff, you go to 10.
or 25% right now for China.
Like going at 60.
Oh, wait, 2%, I'm talking 2% overall, but yes, 25% to China. And if up to 60, and if China invades Taiwan, the program's 200% tariff. That's the stated strategy. So do those numbers start to make it infeasible, or how does that cost just get absorbed and transferred in the cost of energy?
Typically it would,
Yeah, right?
right? I mean, it's passive.
Mhm.
And that's why I was saying in that analysis, the overall impact, I think, on the Trump administration for us will be some budget impact, but it's really, I think, ultimately may slow us down in terms of meeting our goals, because if affordability continues to be important, which we know it is, it's always going to be juxtaposed to how fast can we meet those renewable goals that we have. And if the prices spike up, while at the same time the price of natural gas continues to decrease, that increases our PCIA and potentially makes renewables more expensive. So I feel like we do have a great procurement team led by Roy, who knows how to navigate this and has a very good sort of sense of forecasting.
Is there talk of, I mean, I hadn't heard this in the, pre-election phase, but talk of incentives for US manufacturing of solar? I know Trump doesn't like wind, but I don't think he's anti-solar. Why he doesn't like wind? Because of his golf course, I
Yes,
believe,
yeah.
but in terms of solar, and maybe if there's a silver lining that there could be incentives, grants or something for US manufacturing.
I'm sure, gotcha.
It's a great question.
I hadn't heard that. There's a lot of, because a lot of talk about cars.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, just as I'm sure we all are doing, is that I mean, it's a huge, honestly, it's like 80 or 90% of all the IRA money is going to red states, not to blue states.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden, the red state legislatures, the senators and especially the Congress people, where all this money is coming into their districts in Tennessee, and Carolina, or wherever, are like, oh, we're gonna roll that all back and claw that all back. Ooh, so, you heard yesterday already, the administration-elect kind of downplaying a lot of things, like, well, maybe we won't quite be able to,
They'll rebrand it.
Yeah,
and they're starting to lower all the expectations in their language, and they're starting to say, which, it's just fascinating.
the wars haven't been solved and it's been over 24 hours. I thought that was that's what I'd heard.
So, right.
January 20th.
So it is an interesting conundrum that I think they're going to have to sort of manage through. And California's not gonna be a big windfall of anything, I don't think. But possibly, yes, like the red state investment might continue, so.
It would be great if it's not redirected to fossil fuels. That'd be terrific. That's the key.
Well, they also are gonna have a very, very rich deficit with, if they actually end up taking the tax cuts. I will make you a bet it will come some of this money. I think they will claw that.
Oh, I think so too.
I mean, I think if you're looking at a $7 trillion
Deficit.
deficit by the end of 2030. Right. They're gonna have to find it somewhere, yeah. And they can't take it all out of the Department of Education.
They can.
It's not that much there.
It's too small. But anyway. I mean, the natural gap, more like, petroleum products question. So the assumption is that if the administration is much more favorable, the new administration is much more favorable to fossil fuels, there's an increase in natural gas production. On the PCIA piece, that would mean that you find a drop in natural gas prices, which would then decrease the value of these PCIA related investments in the package. So that PCI would increase, is that?
And because the market price benchmark, right, which sets that, would then mean that the IOUs are not able to recover as much of their costs.
Right,
In
correct.
those long-term contracts.
Correct.
On the market as they would when the cost of gas are high, so it's an inverse, did I get that right, Nick?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe there's a lot that goes into PCIA, like RA and
Yeah.
rent costs also, but for the brown cost and manpower costs.
Which is why in the memo that I wrote. If we see sort of downward pricing on natural gas, I think it will, it'll cause upward pricing.
Right.
And slow us all down in terms of the transition to electrification and. Because that, electricity is potentially more expensive.
How often is the PCIA reset?
See.
Once a year.
Yep, January 1.
Beginning of the year.
Okay.
Which is why we don't know yet what our rates are gonna do, and we will bring that back to the board, even if there's recommendation for no change. We will have the opportunity to look at it.
and to the extent that the assets that are calculated, that are used to figure out what the PCIA is, to the extent that those fossil fuel and burning assets continue to stay in production because of other policy, I think that ultimately in the longer term also affects how long we're gonna have to be paying higher PCAs. Because if we can retire those particular investments sooner than later, then that'll have an impact. But the potential policies for this administration are one that will drill, baby, drill, right?
I keep wondering when the PCIA in California, or for those of us who are, I'm on the very first vintage that ever existed, which is well over, let's see. So 2011, 2010 vintage, so what is that, almost 15
Yeah.
years? Thinking, oh, these contracts are. It's just.
Still there.
Where's that sunset?
Yeah. I remember Pradeep explaining that 6 years ago. And yeah, just waiting, like, okay, we know, we're gonna, these sunk costs, I mean, they got that. They're not going away. Okay, thanks. Back on the budget. Okay, well, Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on to last item, which is committee member reports. Do we have any?
I will say congratulations all around from the one who wasn't on. Very happy with the results, very frustrating when you can't vote for people that you want, you don't live there, so.
Well, I'm hoping to come, it's like 6 votes.
Yes. Well, the top, like we put, and then there's 3 in Karen.
Yeah.
Should this? Oh, yeah, I get it.
It's adjourned.
Okay, we still adjourn, and our next meeting is.
The last one.
Okay,
Oh.
January.
all right, thank you, meeting adjourned, thank you.
Recording.